Chairman, ranking members, and members of the committee, thank you so much for this invitation and the opportunity to speak the truth of what is happening in our communities. My name is Abigail Echohawk. I'm a citizen of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Seattle Indian Health Board and Urban Indian Health Program in Seattle, Washington, where I also direct the Urban Indian Health Institute, the nation's only national tribal epidemiology center. In 2018, UIHI, the Urban Indian Health Institute, released the very first report of its kind detailing the sexual assault of American Indian Alaska Native women in urban settings. We found that 94% of the women that we had surveyed had been sexually assaulted in their lifetime. As a direct result of that, we saw things such as high rates of substance misuse, we saw homelessness, and all of the things that happen when somebody has experienced such incredible trauma. But what we saw was a shock across the nation at the data that we presented that is even higher than most of the members read today as they talked about the violence that happens in my community. But I will tell you, Indian country was not shocked. This is the lived experience of many of us every day. However, you often don't know about it because the data is missing. And I recognize that because I am part of that missing data. I experienced my first rape at the age of 6 years old. And at the age of 10, when it was reported to law enforcement at the home of where I was at in Alaska, law enforcement made the decision to not prosecute as a result of what they said was lack of resources. And I wish my story was unique, but I know it's not. It is one that is experienced across Indian country today. And when we buried my rapist, the dozens of women who experience the same thing, who I watch impacted by this crisis as a direct result of the sexual assault that he inflicted on us as young children. Many of them suffered substance misuse. Many of them went missing several times, and several of them were murdered. In 2018, I stood alongside Senator Lisa Murkowski, and we released the very first data report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And it was, again, data that shocked the country, but nobody in Indian country was surprised by. We found that the data did not exist on this crisis, and simple things were happening across law enforcement, such as not even having a box to mark American Indian Alaska Native. So law enforcement wasn't even being given the ability to recognize and put into the data that these people were Native. And as a direct result, you all need this data to make policy-driven decisions, but it's more than that. The data upholds the treaty and trust obligation that is owed to American Indian Alaska Native tribes. This is part of what you need in order to hold up this treaty and trust obligations and for us to get the resources that we need. And I wish I could say things were different. As a result of our work and that of numerous tribes and grassroots organizers and families across the country, we passed Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act that was signed into law by President Trump in 2020. But we know that not all of those aspects, particularly the data, have actually been carried out. And so what do? We do it ourselves. I have been part of training law enforcement across the nation on how to input data within their data systems. We have worked with organizations and companies who are putting out the tech that is being used by law enforcement, and we do it uncompensated. Because both of the reports I just talked about had no federal dollars behind them, we self-funded them as an organization, and in fact, most of them were funded by speaking fees that I charge. We're doing it ourselves, and it is necessary. This data is allowing us to go missing and to do it in a way that makes us invisible, and we need to have accurate data. Right now, with the opportunities that exist using AI, using machine learning, we need to see that implemented across DOJ because their databases can't even talk to each other. We need to use those resources, however, it must be done in collaboration with the tribal communities. There are so many other things that I could touch on and it is within my testimony, but I want to end with this story. I was speaking with young women, and all of these women had been trafficked. They were all under the age of 18. They had been kidnapped. They had been taken by their traffickers, injected with drugs, and then they had been trafficked, and I was sitting with a group of them who had been recovered, some of them who will never have children as a result of the physical assaults that they experienced. I shared with them my story. And specifically, I shared with them how our traditional ways are what healed me. Our traditional ways are why I'm standing in front of you today. Our traditional ways are the reason that we can move forward and have change within our communities. I shared with them that the blueberry in Alaska, one that is important to me, it has survived the worst. We get to negative 70 degrees, and we also get to over 100 degrees. And I shared with them when I go and gather the blueberry, when I stand on our land, I know that I can survive the worst in order to ensure the best. Afterwards, I never know if my words make a difference. I was standing in a conference, and a young woman several years later runs up to me and grabs me by the arms, and she's pressing her face against me. Tears are running down her face, and she says to me, "Abigail, do you remember me?" She said, "Abigail, I want to tell you, I'm a blueberry too." Our traditional ways and our traditional Indian medicine needs to be incorporated in the way that we serve our survivors of violence, and there are opportunities to do that, not only through CMS reimbursing it in our healthcare services, but ensuring that across the administration we have access to that, and I would love to share more with you that in the future. And I hope that every single one of you recognizes that my rape was not partisan, and you all now have a responsibility to stand with us. This is in your hands to uphold treaty and trust obligations and to recognize that your voices together will make the change that my community needs. My question to you is, will you stand with us?
Thank you, Ms. Egelhawk, for your testimony. The chair now recognizes Dr. Boltel for 5 minutes.